Thank you. My name is Hal Sriver, and I am a Senior Solutions Engineer here at Unravel Data. For those that don't know, Unravel Data is a data ops and FinOps industry-leading observability platform. We're built for modern data stacks like Snowflake, as well as others, Databricks, BigQuery, EMR, Hadoop, just to name a few. Throughout my years as a pre-sales engineer in the data space, I've worked with some of the largest data customers and solving some of their most complex challenges. And they're using platforms like Snowflake. So in today's topic, the FinOps advantage, aligning data teams with financial goals in Snowflake environments. As far as today's conversation goes, I'm going to walk you through what FinOps teams today follow in terms of a methodology that's been actually working very well for many customers. Then I'm going to talk about some of the gaps in this methodology and ultimately provide you a demo on how Unravel solves for these gaps. And actually solves for these data teams looking to align their financial goals in their Snowflake environments. Okay, so let's begin. FinOps phases. So if you're a part of a FinOps group, you may be familiar with the FinOps.org organization. If not, what it is a collection of thousands of customers that have all gotten together to say, hey, we need to define some policies, some methodologies, some processes, right, and everything in between to really get control of cloud costs. And more data and processing is being done in the cloud today than ever before, right? The more folks wanted or really needed to get a handle on this. And so they created this really great organization called the FinOps organization. And they have a ton of content on it if you go visit FinOps.org website. But today we're going to focus on and concentrate on these FinOps phases. And these are the phases that I see a lot of customers implementing to various degrees, and where some do well, others not so well. But here's the graphic, right? Here's the three phases. You see those. They're on this kind of flywheel, and that's on purpose because this whole process is meant to be continuous, right? But let's start talking about these. So the first one here is this inform stage, and so really what this is all about is to provide visibility and allocation, right? In terms of where all of your spend is going. And the actions here for the FinOps folks are things like collecting and analyzing the cloud cost data, from those cloud service providers, but also really for the focus today, right, from Snowflake. And what these groups will do next is they'll allocate costs to projects, to teams, to groups, maybe to products themselves. It could also be business units in other cost centers. Basically having the ability to divvy up, slice and dice that data to really understand where some of those cost drivers could lie. And last but not least, establish these reporting and dashboarding products, right, for transparency. So what's the goal? The goal is to enable stakeholders to really understand cloud spend and different usage patterns. So if I'm going to spend time and resources in optimizing, I need to really know where I should be spending my time, because most organizations have very limited staff and time, right? So being able to have proper reporting in place allows for those organizations to know where they should be focusing their time to optimize. Okay, so once organizations have a good handle on that, the next phase or stage here is the optimize phase. Okay, so and really the key focus here is all around efficiency and cost savings. So users at this stage are looking to identify inefficiencies, waste, right? So things like underutilization, under and oversized warehouses, even things like suboptimal minimum and maximum cluster settings, or maybe we're just using the wrong t-shirt size, right? That's mismatched to the workload. Or maybe it could also be code inefficiency. So things like queries that have opportunities to improve their performance, but because of some sort of join inefficiency or SQL anti-pattern, this in turn improves their cost efficiency as well, right? So being able to identify some of that and using the tools available natively, like account usage views, information and usage schemas, Snowsite dashboards, resource monitors, all these things, right? But then ultimately looking to optimize that architecture for both cost and performance. So there needs to be a little bit of balance there. And really the goal in this stage is to maximize value, right? while at the same time minimizing unnecessary spend. And it's not really about reducing costs. It's really more about maximizing the ROI of the spend that you are providing in these very powerful modern data stacks like Snowflake. And then once organizations have a good handle on that, the last phase, the operate phase, and so this is the third phase, right? And really the key here is to continually improve and now start to think about and apply some governance right in place. So this way we can continue to optimize, get better at it collectively as an organization at the same time. And so some of the actions that users will take here at this point is to begin to establish policies, processes, setting those guardrails, and maybe even automating some of those cost management processes themselves. And ultimately, what's the goal? It's to kind of foster a culture of accountability, collaboration, maybe with the mindset of sustaining cost optimization and aligning, of course, our work with the business goals. Once that's in place, once it's settled in, rinse and repeat, right? That's the flywheel. Now, keep in mind that all of this is the theory, right? And a lot of organizations may start out in this inform stage and not quite be ready to move over to optimize. And that's okay. I've seen a lot of organizations who have a good solid foundation or set of reporting in that inform stage, and they're starting to apply those optimization techniques, and that's fine. But I'd say even fewer folks have all three of these in place already, right? So if you're looking at this flywheel and you're saying to yourself, geez, I'm only in phase one or haven't even started to think about it, or maybe I'm starting to move to phase two, or yeah, you're just stuck in the first place on how to start, rest assured you're not alone, right? A lot of people struggle to do this due to the fact that there's just limited time, really just limited time at the end of the day and limited resources. Okay, so now let's start talking about some of the gaps, right? And specific to these organizations that are running Snowflake and that they're trying to apply these FinOps phases. So yeah, so back here on the inform stage, some of the challenges that I see a lot with folks is really just a lack of granular visibility, right? It's just as simple as that. So Snowflake's credit-based, billing for compute and storage and other cloud services, right, makes it hard to map costs to specific teams or projects or your workloads. So for example, warehouses or other serverless features, like if you're using Snowpipe, can obscure who or what is driving that spend. So being able to track costs and allocating costs accurately becomes challenging. Even if you're trying to use tagging, like a lot of folks do, a lot of the tagging that organizations try to use today become unreliable or incomplete, sometimes. So this becomes challenging when trying to adopt this inform stage. So the other piece, especially on Snowflake, because you're using shared resourcing, right? So warehouses that are used by multiple teams, this makes it hard to attribute costs to specific teams or projects. So for an example, today, organizations are using data sharing, multi-cluster warehouses or multi-accounts, right? Multi-account setups. Those folks struggle to track cross-entity accounts. And this is especially tricky for enterprises with global teams, right? Sharing data sets. And so if you're trying to use these tools that I mentioned earlier, like account usage views and information and usage schemas or resource monitors, it becomes really super challenging and complex very quickly to correlate all of them together to make those like-to-like connections. So if you tried it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. Optimize. Okay, on the optimize side, you have dynamic workloads, right? Sometimes it's challenging to choose the right warehouse size. So, hey, what t-shirt size should I be selecting based on my workload? And it's usually going to be a trade-off between cost and speed, right? Cost and performance. So if you over-provision, you're wasting credits, you're wasting cost, while under-provisioning slows down your critical jobs, right? Maybe miss SLAs even. And then, oh yeah, let's not forget about auto-scaling, which adds another level of complexity, right, if not configured properly. So it's also a trade-off for teams, like I actually just mentioned, right, to balance for performance and cost. So teams may prioritize performance over cost, and they might not be checking for over-provisioned resources. It's all about protecting the SLAs for those developers. And also just could be a lack of expertise, right? There's literally hundreds of things you could configure or have to think about, especially if you're optimizing from maybe a code level perspective. Or maybe someone just starting off on their journey in SQL querying, right? In quoting in SQL, for example, right? They might not know what what they're doing isn't cost effective. Okay, so last but not least, right, the operate stage. So governance and accountability. Just the cultural silos alone, right? The engineers who prioritize for performance, the finance teams who demand, cost cutting, and the business leaders who want that agility, right? Bridging all of these priorities requires ongoing kind of negotiations, shared KPIs, those types of things. And things like maintaining policies, if that's tagging related to warehouse timeouts, some kind of rule like that, or something along those lines. Those things become tedious, especially as workloads scale. And then what happens is those teams end up reverting back to old habits without these automated guardrails. So literally what I was just talking about, cultural resistance, right? This is the perfect phrase for that description. Okay, so these are the challenges. And if organizations can just get over some of the major hurdles here, then they can really start to adopt that FinOps flywheel methodology to optimize for cost for FinOps teams. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is switch on over. Okay, I'm going to switch over, make sure I'm sharing the right tab here. So I'm going to now through demo walk you through how FinOps teams are actually automating these best practices from that inform, from that optimize, and from that operate, those stages with a platform like Unravel. So imagine I'm a FinOps team member. I'm trying to understand cost, and how to allocate spend. And I have a lot of warehouses, that are shared. They're hosting jobs, maybe via some scheduled like Airflow orchestration pipeline. And we want to understand at a very granular level where the spend is going. So the nice thing here is, so you're looking at Unravel, and right out of the box, you're getting some nice reports. And we're going to start here in this cost tab. And I'm going to talk through some of these subtabs, right? And what this is all about is it's providing granular details and visibility. So remember from that inform stage, and the challenges there, right, is getting that granular detail into cost. So more specifically, let me start here on this overview tab. So in this section, you're going to see some familiar metrics like you might find in the Snowflake UI. So things like total cost, right? Total credits consumed. How does that break down between compute and storage and maybe data transfer? But then I have some trending graphs here in terms of those costs and consumptions. But also I have at the warehouse level. So again, once this paints, you're going to see some familiar metrics and some familiar information. So again, things around that breakdown of compute cost across those categories, my total virtual warehouse cost, total number of virtual warehouses, an average cost across those. There's some trending here as well. I start to get down into some nitty gritty around the most expensive warehouses and listing those out top to bottom, average cost trends for those warehouses, and same thing from a virtual warehouse perspective, and a cost breakdown across all of those warehouses. So next, though, this is where, and I'm going to jump here to this users subtab. So here's where things get more interesting. So again, we can see things like total users, average cost, query cost rather, per user, and some trending around that, right? Top users by query cost. So hey, who are my top offenders at that user level, right? That granular user level. Estimated chargeback from a percentage standpoint by user, and some trending related to that granular user group. So sometimes when I'm demoing, and this is a good place to pause, I always try to encourage my audience to reflect on how you're planning to do this today, right? Are you currently just looking at it at the warehouse level? Are there use cases for, and are you granular enough to look at it from the user level, or even from the query level here, which I'll get to here in a moment? I'd venture to guess probably, right? So usually when we're talking to some of our customers about FinOps use cases around cost observability and those usage statistics, a lot of them are looking at things at the data product level. And in their case, it's sometimes more useful to track at that user level because they span multiple products, right? And that's fine. Our experience here at Unravel is that that's usually always the case with our customers. And so to that end, I like to stop here at this tags sub tab level. And this is a great place to see chargeback and cost trending by your warehouse tags. And I don't have very interesting tags in my demo environment here, but it meets that criteria, right? So again, from that inform phase through that FinOps lens, this is where some of those gaps in being able to support details around cost allocation for specific business groupings and other business mappings, right, or departments or cost centers through tagging. This is where that's being filled in. Okay, last but not least, at that query level. So in the hierarchy of things, right, we've seen at the warehouse level, a bit more granular with users. And so now, what does each user do? They run queries against that warehouse, right? And this is really where we can drill into that lower level. So like the other dashboards, you have total queries, average cost per query, some trending there. And I'll direct your attention to this middle panel here. Most expensive query signatures. So a query signature is really just a grouping of a specific query text. But this is useful because it allows us to break down into different categories that cost metric, right? So for example, if I come down here, outside of this other category at 85%, right? I have some of these other categories. It's a small demo environment, so not a lot of data, but this guy here in green. This particular query signature is accounting for almost 3% in this other category, right? In terms of that hierarchy of most expensive queries when I'm looking at my Snowflake bill. And then some trending in terms of those signature costs. Now, this is all well and good at that granular level, right, which we need to satisfy part of that inform phase in that flywheel. But now I'm going to zoom back out a bit. And we're going to come here to this homepage. I'm going to clean this up a little bit here so it's a little more readable. So this is really our executive level view, if you will. We spoke down at that granular query level, and that's down there. It's pretty granular, but because we're talking here from the context of that FinOps best practice, right? It's really important to get that zoomed out 10,000 foot bird's eye view of what's going on from my entire estate, right? So it's a little bit different design here, but this is where we get a glimpse into the health of the total environment. And we're doing a few things here. So just notice from the time standpoint, in the past 7-day rolling period, we're getting our total cost in dollars and cents, broken down again into the compute, storage, and data transfer categories, right? How many warehouses are currently running? How many queries? I see almost 197,000 queries that we're monitoring here. How many tables? What's the size of those tables in terabytes? How many users? And here, how many accounts? So this is where some of that challenge comes in when you're limiting yourself in some respects to some of those tools that I mentioned out of the box before, some of that native tooling, right? Because you've got to take all that information and correlate it, even across accounts. And so I just wanted to point that out here that we're doing that for you. But I also want to bring your attention to these 3 circles here, right, in kind of this middle pane. This is the 3 most important things that Unravel does, which really coincides nicely with the FinOps best practices. So what are those things? Increase productivity, improve performance, and ultimately reduce cost wastage. And here is where we continue to inform around specific areas for potential improvement. But let's dive into a little bit of these things here. So what do I see here? 100% of my warehouses have some sort of insight related to, remember, we're monitoring 32 warehouses, have some sort of insights that when we come down here to the analysis are across several categories, right? So underutilization, right? There's some wasted cost associated with the fact that that the warehouses are not appropriately sized, right? Or maybe they're not consolidated appropriately, right? A warehouse is underutilized when the workload running on it, right, don't utilize the full extent of the resources available. We're leaving dollars on the table, right? So therefore, those workloads can run on a smaller, cheaper warehouse without performance degradation. Queries running on oversized warehouses, or even queries running on undersized warehouses, right? warehouses with suboptimal min-max cluster settings. I think I mentioned this not too long ago, right? But just one category. Out of all of those 197-ish thousand queries that we're monitoring, a quarter of them have insights which could lead to performance improvements and consequently cost savings. So, and same with table insights, right? Do we have some cold tables? Do we have some duplicates that we can get rid of? There's 91% of the tables and that 960 terabytes of data that resides in those tables that we can look at because they have insights, right? So what does this all mean from a dollars and cents perspective, from a performance improvement perspective, right? We're giving you those hard ROI numbers right here at the top. So from an annualized savings perspective, if the insights that we are providing are actioned, there is an annualized savings of between 1.6 and 2.3 million just within the warehouses alone, and then broken down across tables and queries as well. That also translates into a performance increase, right? So improved utilization. This is where I was talking about. It's not always about cost savings. It's more about being able to leverage that ROI out of the platform, right? So improved utilization by 30% across 91% of your warehouses, 30% faster on average queries, right? Based on Unravel's recommendations. So let's see. Let's dive into one of these from an example standpoint. And I guess before I do that, just from a review perspective, when we're talking about the different ways to scale warehouses in Snowflake, first we have those t-shirt sizes, right? This is more commonly referred to as that scale-up architecture. Hey, I have this large. It gives me 16 cores. It gives me 64 gigs of RAM, or I have a medium, a small, whatever, something that gives me something smaller, 8 cores and whatever, 2 gigs. But this is where I'm thinking about my workload, running my heaviest workload maybe, right? I need a lot of memory and CPU because I'm servicing my heaviest query. I'm a developer, especially maybe an inexperienced one. If given the option, will always pick the beefiest, but available to them, that biggest t-shirt size, but might not always need it. Hey, I'm not really thinking about cost, right? Or there's that other use case, that scale out architecture, right? That this is where that auto scaling comes into play here. I start out with one extra small, but now I have 10 of those. This is our classic concurrency use case. How many users at once do I expect to service? These are all things I need to think about as a developer, right? That's that retail store during the holidays example. Or the 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. operation where I have my heaviest user count, but at nighttime, fewer, not so much, right? So you got to keep all that in mind. That's where this underutilization insight comes into play, right? But let's dive into one of these here and just pick an example. So right-sizing warehouses, pretty simple, right? There's quite a few, 27 as a matter of fact, out of those 32 that have some sort of right-sizing recommendation. So let's dig into one of these here. Now, in terms of our recommendations, before I talk you through what you're looking at here, in terms of our recommendations for warehouse sizing, we take in a lot of information, right? Idle time, size of the warehouse, is it a virtual warehouse? Lots of telemetry data. We take all those things into consideration. And so our algorithm within our purpose-built AI, right? All it's saying is, hey, I'm looking at what you chose. I'm looking at how it ran. Did you really need that size of warehouse? No. Then let's make this change. It equals less spend. It's very simple, right? But let's walk through this. So what you're looking at here is a schedule. And in the gray bars, so horizontally, days of the week, right? Sunday through Saturday, vertically, hours of the day. Gray bar is the current configuration or what was selected. Green is that new configuration, right? That new recommendation. What we're saying is we observed you chose a 5XL, but you could have ran on a 4XL. And we're giving you a schedule. So throughout each day of the week and each hour of the day, we're giving you that schedule. We're giving you that easy button to apply those recommendations, right? For an annualized savings of, in this case, for this particular warehouse, 70 grand. So powerful, right? That's that automation of those actionable insights that I was talking about to just start to move from that inform stage to that optimization stage. Okay, so let's take another optimization example. I'm just looking at the time here. So from a query perspective, right? So this time we're going to look at that code level, right? And see what some of the cost inefficiencies are there. So just to recap, looking up at the top, right, we had 160 plus thousand-ish queries, of which we're saying 48,000 of them have insights, have some inefficient queries, right? Opportunities to either improve their performance, actually improve their performance and their cost efficiency, right? So that's a lot of queries too, by the way. 100, almost 200,000 plus queries in that period of time. I'm sure some of you have a lot more than that in your organization. I couldn't imagine having to coordinate, the manual effort needed to review that many. But again, here we're saying, we got that 24%, or over 48,000 of them that Unravel's AI engine has flagged for some inefficiency where there's an opportunity to improve. Now, there's a lot of impact categories here. So things like queries not using the right clustering key, single row inserts, join inefficiencies of different types, performance inefficiency, SQL anti-patterns. There's quite a few that we are monitoring for. But again, let the machine that doesn't need to sleep, right, or doesn't make mistakes, do the work for you, that expert in the box. So several categories here, right, aside from the impact. Untapped savings, again, just to call that out. This is the annualized roll-up from a dollars and cents perspective, from that credits standpoint, in terms of savings, and that performance improvement based off of those Unravel insights. So I'm going to click into one of these, and let's look at join inefficiencies. And let's expand our time out a little bit. And let's look at, okay, avoid exploding joins. Okay, this is that Cartesian product example. Let's find something interesting here, hopefully. Avoid exploding joins. All right. So what are we looking at here? Several efficiency insights that Unravel has surfaced in terms of this particular query, right? Things like a selection of more than a certain number of columns in a table results in some expensive, resource-intensive query that got called out. We're recommending moving perhaps to a larger warehouse to improve performance, but we clicked in here because of the join inefficiency. And so this says avoid exploding joins, right? That's a Cartesian product when a join condition produces more output records. You can see here almost 12 million records versus what it took in, which is around half that. We can also take a look at the bytes scanned, right, related to that. So what we're recommending is to review that join condition and just check for, perhaps duplicates in the column in order to fix that join condition. And the warehouse size, right, also, which we're showing here. Did we really need that? Was that a result of the explosion of data that we had to query? It's just food for thought. Okay, so now that we've been informed, and then I'm going to navigate back to the homepage here, on what the state of the estate is really, right, in terms of the health of our Snowflake environment. We've been informed on where we have an opportunity to optimize in some of that architecture, that infrastructure level, right, and also through some of that, those thoughtful AI-driven insights and recommendations, right, at that code level. But we can also automate this, right? We can wrap some governance around these processes in a lot of different ways. So I'm just going to talk about one or two of these right now. So again, if we come back down here to this insight analysis section, but we hone in on operations, okay? When you talk about the software development lifecycle, we have ways to integrate into those, right? So we have CI/CD integration, Unravel works through that, just as an example, right? Through, let's say, your GitHub repository, calling some action, a developer would check in some piece of code, GitHub calls Unravel, it brings in the recommendations, Unravel would see it, what the inefficiencies are, if any. Does this code have any? Yes or no? The developer would make a change based on the recommendations, then move the code to production. This can all be traced and tracked through a ticketing platform integration, something like ServiceNow. A developer would never necessarily need to log in to Unravel. We would meet them where they're used to working. You can gamify this as well. We've seen customers have success here, right? Maybe some monetary incentive for being the top user on a board for either addressing the most Unravel insights or saving the most money. Also from an alerting perspective, right? We provide out-of-box alerts, or you can create your own custom alerts. So we can start to develop and enforce good governance policy through alerting, right? So just as an example there, a simple use case, maybe there's a policy I want to set up at the Snowflake query level, right? There's been an influx of queries lately that cost $1,000 or more each, right? I want to know when this is occurring. So if it goes over that $1,000 limit, right, I want to do something. $1,000 is the price tag. That's my trigger. Now let's automatically perform some action, maybe through a notification channel, maybe a post on Slack, maybe an email, some other mechanism to start to upskill those developers, right? Here's a question. So what are the key challenges organizations face when trying to align their Snowflake operations with financial objectives? And how can these be overcome? All right, so a two-part question. I guess I'll start by answering it this way. First, you need to align on a common metric, and that has to be cost. Cost is something that's universal, right? If there's resource inefficiencies that's going to affect cost, then it's important to align there, right, and start to report there. So that's step one. Then there's also our ability to start prioritizing on where to spend and focus our time to start addressing some of those inefficiencies. And I guess from a challenges perspective, if you're limiting yourself to using some of those views and resource monitors that I mentioned earlier, you're going to be limited from the perspective of how many resources you have, right, to throw at that, right? So why not automate all of it with Unravel? So let us do the tedious, mundane work for you. Let us, find those inefficiencies, the optimizing, right, et cetera, so your users can spend time doing more of those revenue generating activities. Okay. Another question. How can a data actionability platform provide cost visibility, and what types of recommendations does it typically offer? Okay, so I guess as you saw, right, Unravel provides purpose-built AI that provides insights and recommendations that are specific to Snowflake, right? We also provide explanations, right? So for that junior resource, right, there can be those leveling up opportunities, and then they know where to implement those changes. I guess I'll also mention, the governance and guardrails part, right? So you can truly operationalize and implement these insights and recommendations at scale, so you can really start realizing cost savings and improving your ROI. Okay, last question. Yeah, last question. Can you provide examples of how organizations have successfully implemented FinOps principles in their Snowflake environments, and what benefits have they seen? So like I mentioned at the beginning, I see a lot of maturity of organizations that start to implement these phases of the FinOps flywheel. It's a great methodology. We're starting to see a lot of organizations get great results out of it. I guess I'd go further to say, when looking at that flywheel, don't feel you have to immediately be on that optimize phase, right? Don't sweat that, because I see folks who struggle just getting out of the inform stage. So I would suggest using a purpose-built platform like Unravel, because we were designed for this methodology, and automating some of these recommendations across the various platforms that we support, right? Not just Snowflake. It's what we've been doing for over 10 years now. Okay, so I don't see any more questions. I guess what I'll leave you with is, if I could share a slide again. All right. If you think the things that I've been sharing with you today are helpful, right, or can be of help for you, then I would suggest that you go today, get your free Snowflake health check. You can do that simply by visiting our URL there, right? unraveldata.com/databricks-health-check-request. And go ahead, check that out. It's totally free to you, absolutely no cost. I definitely recommend you try out the product, see what life could be like if you were using Unravel for your data ops and FinOps observability use cases. Again, thank you for your time. My name, again, is Hal Sriver, and we will see you on the next one.